It is the #1 show on HBO Max.
The two most talked about prospects in the world.
We have got the stars of Heated Rivalry.
The show is called Heated Rivalry.
Heated Rivalry.
Heated Rivalry.
Heated Rivalry.
Canada's Shane Hollander.
Hudson Williams is here.
And Russia's Ilya Rozanov.
Connor's story, everybody.
Women everywhere are becoming bold and vocal about what it is they like and dislike. And surprising to some, what they like happens to be dudes who kiss other dudes. Is this simply a voyeuristic preference, or is this something deeply rooted in the history of gender repression that is somehow liberated by queer stories? And yes, this episode will contain heated rivalry, so please strap in, and let's get started. Fangirls have been projecting love stories onto male dynamics restricted by heteronormative plots for decades, probably centuries. But media and cultural studies experts point to Kirk and Spock as the most significant marker we have, not just for the invention of modern fanfiction overall, but for the specific trend of male-only relationships being used as a vehicle to explore romance and intimacy within female audiences. Back in the 1960s, a sort of sexual revolution began in the Western world, beginning when the FDA approved birth control pills as a form of contraceptive. Finally, there was a way for American women to control whether or not a fun little fling would last one night or 18 long, expensive years. For the first time in modern history, women gained the physical freedom to explore their sexuality somewhat independently. The pill didn't solve misogyny overnight, but it slowly dissolved the God-fearing repression embedded in American culture. Sex was finally something women could find fun, empowering, and child-free. Now, obviously, society can still be quite critical of sexuality, both its individual expression and how it relates to partnerships. There was and is plenty of shame and public scrutiny around sexuality that doesn't align with the traditional straight man is a dog, straight woman is demure narrative. So, things like fanfiction and smut novels emerged as a tool of expression amongst women in queer communities. Fanfiction specifically began amongst Trekkies writing about Kirk and Spock back in the 1970s in a subgenre called slash fiction. Slash, by definition, deals with same-sex characters that in the parent narrative are avowedly or assumedly heterosexual. By dwelling in the Star Trek universe, the reader does not have to ask, who are these characters? Where did they come from? What is their world like? The reader knows that from the outset. Slash fiction, and more broadly fanfiction, allows readers to skip introductions and get to the emotional core of the relationship between two characters. And since queer dynamics have been rarely seen in mainstream media, audiences have been somewhat forced to explore emotional and physical bonds between same-sex characters on their own. Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, Bucky Barnes and Steve Rogers, Batman and Superman. Everything is There are archives filled with nearly every combination you can imagine exploring the relationship between two men. Enemies, friends, strangers, all turned lovers in the depths of the internet. But lately, this type of dynamic is being explored more and more by mainstream film and TV. Call Me By Your Name, Challengers, and most recently, Heated Rivalry. And the biggest consumers of this media type over and over again, well, it just happens to be women. So what is it that women find so alluring about male relationships? Why are women howling at the moon for the hockey boys so aggressively? First, let me state, I am avidly against purity culture, trad wife propaganda, and anything that demands women need to be modest. Women, the only thing you ever need to be is educated and well-fed. But as a lover of excellent storytelling, I've recently started to feel that nudity and intimacy scenes aren't being used to their full advantage. Almost everything being produced these days has intimacy in it, which is what enabled me to start watching these with a more critical lens. If I wasn't seeing so much booty on screen, trust, I would not be forming deep opinions on it. I would just be enjoying it. But because we have a plethora of booty, when these scenes come on, I can't help but wonder, does what I'm seeing advance the plot or inform me about the characters, either individually or as partners? These scenes, more often than not, fulfill a desire for spectacle, not plot development. For example, in House of the Dragon, there's a scene where young Rhaenyra is SA'd outside a brothel by her uncle Daemon, and in a cloud of confusion and fluster, decides to explore further with her guardian Sir Criston Cole. We learn a lot from this sequence, including that Rhaenyra is a virgin who's never been educated about sex, but she is willing to use her position of authority to get what she wants. Now, I believe all of these plot points are essential to learn. However, not everything needed to be shown to the extent it was on screen. And on the one hand, watching Rhaenyra being assaulted by her uncle is functionally establishing the power dynamic in this relationship, the complex feelings of shame and guilt coinciding with pleasure, and the vitriol between these two individuals. On the other hand, the scene with Rhaenyra and Criston is more of an aesthetic insert. Before either of them is actually naked, we learn everything we need to learn. Rhaenyra wants to use Criston for her own pleasure. Criston tries to refuse due to his duty and honor as a member of the King's Guard, but Rhaenyra solves the problem by asserting her royal authority to get what she wants. It's uncomfortable and should make us feel dissatisfied as viewers. Complicated, icky, bad, definitely a situation that will breed a lot of issues. However, because we watch the intimacy play out, we actually end up feeling more like a romance has brewed in a sexy and playful fashion. Well, we're supposed to. I still felt icky, but the team of people directing the episode said that the intimacy scene was meant to be sexy and pleasure-filled.
The idea that this is actually abuse felt really important to explore. We put aside that Daemon is her uncle.
She gets excited by it. I think what it's saying there is that young women want sex as much as young men.
And this is my conundrum with on-screen intimacy. The characters within the Game of Thrones universe are shown as powerful forces of nature, capable of manipulating the game to their advantage in many, many ways. It's low fantasy, high drama, and plenty of political intrigue. It's not a romance show first. Romance functions as a necessary B-plot. So when intimacy takes center stage, these extremely complicated character interactions are boiled down to a sexy scene that focuses on female pleasure. And that misses the point. In its 15 years of screen time, there are only 2 moments in Game of Thrones that felt good being sexy. When Jon and Ygritte finally get together in that cave, and when Podrick makes a room of prostitutes feel so good they refuse his money.
Ladies, I'm trying to do my work today.
And that one we didn't even see on screen.
Leave me alone type shit.
Intimacy in this show is often forced, coerced, or used as a political tool. Framing these moments in a positive, sexy light kind of confuses the plot, because most of the time it's not consensual or a healthy dynamic between 2 characters. Now, I don't want to bash the series too hard, because what's happening is actually a response to a century of filmmaking rooted in the male gaze. It was only after the Me Too movement in 2017 that conversations about the necessity of improving on-screen intimacy erupted. Actors began asking for professional support when shooting nudity or intimacy, creating a higher demand for intimacy coordinators in film. Simultaneously, women began voicing their discontent with how female pleasure was captured on screen. Hollywood intimacy felt like just another place where men projected their fantasies. Where was the intimacy that empowered and centered the women? Tension between female pleasure and purposeful intimacy exists because women working behind the scenes are rightfully trying to undo a century of male-dominated cinema, but they're doing so within stories that hold intense drama.
Being a female director, I've grown up watching how male directors have directed sex scenes. And as a woman, I have to really think about how to shoot it, because my go-to images are ones that I grew up with, which aren't necessarily from a woman's point of view.
We want to watch stories that have a little risk, a little danger. Conflict is an essential piece of storytelling, but that means on-screen intimacy will always exist with conflict. Bridgerton. Bridgerton celebrates female pleasure. The women in the show experience euphoria and act on their desires. However, the conflict in this world is tied to sex being shameful. Women are punished for scandalous behavior, becoming ruined if they are even kissed out of wedlock. Meanwhile, a man's punishment for ruining a socialite is to be given a position of authority over her and accept her dowry as husband. And I'm not opposed to fun. The thrill of this show is the severity of the culture. The push and pull between lovers who can't even touch is delicious. However, it means that intimacy is used as a catalyst for conflict. As a viewer, I can relish the intensity of what hangs in the air between characters while also feeling discomfort because female pleasure coexists with shame and guilt. And since I exist as a woman, I already carry centuries of shame and guilt about my body and my sexuality that I have to work to undo. Watching women in these scenes can be fun and giggly, but that doesn't automatically mean I feel empowered. But you know what does feel empowering for me? Watching a Russian man top a Canadian man. In this scholarly analysis done by Lucy Neville, some light is shed on why women enjoy watching male-only relationships, pointing to the fact that viewers often feel misrepresented and objectified by female representations on screen. Neville's research was focused on X-rated media, but I think a few of her findings support my feelings about the viewer's relationship with Hollywood intimacy. First, she found that films centering male-only relationships and romances allowed women to employ the female gaze more easily. The male gaze perpetuates an objectification of the female body that doesn't really exist when two men share the screen. It's just inherently harder to direct men through the male gaze, because the patriarchy hasn't spent centuries objectifying the male form. So for us girls who live under constant observation, wondering if we're safe on the subway or if our selfies are being used to generate nude AI images, removing the male gaze provides a sense of freedom where we can experience romance without the reminder that, to men, we are viewed as objects. Neville also discovered that women are drawn to homoerotic stories because they eroticize equality. In stereotypical straight couples, a man dominates and a woman submits. And that isn't just sexual. Women are conditioned to be submissive in every facet of our lives. And while a lot of us are doing the best we can to resist, we're also aware of the gender politics that are present every single day. Heated Rivalry and male-only romances offer a space to enjoy love stories and intimacy without heteronormative power dynamics. Ilya and Shane rank side by side in hockey, constantly going back and forth between who's number 1 and who's number 2. They're both captains of their team, wielding the same amount of power. They probably earn the same salary. They operate in the same social circles. Generally, they live on equal footing with one another. Their major differences exist in how they carry personal trauma and experiences. This equality allows for a more flexible, malleable romance and, by extension, intimacy. Ilya gains dominance in their dynamic because he is more confident and self-assured. However, Shane controls the progression of the relationship in a lot of ways because he decides when his emotional window is open or closed. They dance in time with one another over the course of the show. Their conflicts feel balanced, their burdens are shouldered with mutual levels of struggle. Women can watch and feel a sense of freedom from the gender dynamics present in their own lives, making the intimacy even more enjoyable because it strips away the sense of shame and guilt associated with performing female sexuality that is present in heteronormative storylines. And let me be clear. Shame is a crucial plot point to the story. Queerness and self-acceptance are a central theme throughout the series. However, intimacy is never produced shamefully. Characters are almost never shown feeling guilty because of the sex. They're shown feeling guilty because they fall in love. The intimacy portrayed is actually full of laughter, banter, playful power dynamics, repeated and active consent, and mutual gain. Plus, the actors have been very open about how safe they felt with one another, how supported they felt by the creative team on set, and how much they relied on an intimacy coordinator to advocate for their protection. Women aren't consuming this show just because it's sexy. It's a really fun, lovely story exploring a really complicated relationship. But I also think the intimacy in the show is such a big part of the conversation because of how well done it is. Watching two men make physical choices that are emotionally driven and grounded in the plot is thrilling, especially when it feels consensual and equal. Oh, hot damn! This show sets an example for how to balance intimacy with conflict, how something dramatic and tension-filled can still be sexy. There is trauma in this show, but the trauma doesn't darken the sexual encounters or turn it into something shameful. Intimacy coordination is still relatively new, and there is so much to learn and discover. Heated Rivalry is an example for anyone who plans to simulate sex in their scripts. Make it purposeful, make it character-driven, and strive for the sex to show us something deeper about the characters. When you do that, it won't matter what gender expression the characters identify with. It will always be sexier to viewers, because it will be rooted in the plot, and we're all watching for the plot, right? Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Go ahead and click the bell so you get notifications every single time I post. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Taylor. I create videos about the creation and consumption of art and entertainment. Basically, I just love to yap about movies and pop culture, so if that's your thing, you are going to enjoy your time here. And if you want more of that, I do it all the time over on my social media. Instagram, TikTok, Letterboxd. You can follow me on all of those platforms. They are linked below. Please leave a comment down below what you think about intimacy in Hollywood, what some of your favorite scenes have been, your least favorite scenes have been, and sort of what you have been learning from seeing more intimacy come into the mainstream. And I think that's all I have for you today. I'm probably gonna go rewatch these episodes for the 16th, 17th time. Yeah, I'll see you in the cottage. Bye!